curiosity is the key to getting authentic and real. You have to get interested in knowing who you are, and that experience can't come just from you. It has to come from feedback.
83% of Americans identify as not very happy, which can hold you back and negatively affect your relationships and your business. On this podcast, we discuss the proven steps to happiness so you can restore balance and rekindle your joy.
Welcome to another episode of How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs. In this podcast, we explore inspiring stories of resilience, transformation, and the pursuit of true happiness. Today, we have a guest that's done it all. She is truly remarkable. Her journey embodies the theme of this episode, lessons in resilience. So today, Patty Ivey is with us to share her story of triumph and transformation. I am so honored. Patty is not only the founder of Down Dog Yoga, and she has her own coaching business now, she's also my teacher. So through Patty, I learned a lot about yoga, about meditation, and about who I am intrinsically, and she's helped me grow. So I'm excited today that she can help you grow as well. So real quick, just to introduce this amazing woman, after a life-changing battle with cancer recently, Patty has redefined her understanding of success, and she's focusing on the power of what true human connection means, right? So she believes deeply in the importance she's taught to me and many about getting curious, to connect with our authentic selves, and to learn to genuinely connect with others. So Patty's journey is both powerful and inspiring, and her insights are sure to provide profound lessons for anyone who's looking to live a life that's more fulfilled and more connected. So please welcome me and welcoming our incredible guest, the Patty Ivey. Thank you, Patty, for being here with us today.
It's so much fun to be here with you, Yvonne. Really, like, wow, what a gift to be with you and to see where and how you're growing into something new and exciting from how we originally met. It's just really great. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And what we're going to share with you guys today, it doesn't take a lifetime. It can take a long time, a little time, but really once you start to listen, learn from others that are sharing their wisdom and opening your eyes, the possibilities are limitless. So, Patty, on our show, we like to come right out of the gates with a compelling question that is sure to provide valuable insight to our audience right away. So, I want to focus, guys. Patty has so much to offer. She is an entrepreneur, like most of you, and she's also gone through a lot. So, Patty, your story as an entrepreneur and what I say as a teacher of a human being, like actual being as a human, is incredibly inspiring. You've started to talk openly about your battle with cancer, right? And how it's shifted your perspective in life. Can you share what initially inspired you to become an entrepreneur? And as a recent cancer survivor, how your perspective on success has evolved?
Yeah, wow, what a great question, a loaded question. So, the entrepreneur piece, I think it was always in me. My dad was an entrepreneur. So, I think that there's a big difference between being an entrepreneur and just being a business owner. And I would say more that I have, from a very young age, been a visionary. And I think a visionary entrepreneur is really more how I would describe myself. Like something would move through me as an inspiration, and then I would create something from nothing. That is at the heart of who I am. And I really get that now. I didn't know that when I was younger. I was just doing it, and it was a little like shooting things out of a cannon, and things would happen. But now I really get that. Like I'm a true visionary. And so it'll be an experience that inspires me. So I've had a number of businesses, but if I'm thinking about the yoga business, I had zero interest in yoga. I didn't do yoga. I actually did not want to do yoga. And I went through knee surgery, and someone said to me, the doctor was like, you got to go to the gym and do yoga. I'm like, ugh, I hate yoga. I don't want to do yoga. And I went anyway because it was going to heal my knee. And the teacher that I was taking this yoga class with at the gym kept talking about this guy, Baron Baptiste. And we started to, talk, and I'd ask questions about her life. And fast forward, she wanted to open a yoga studio. She knew I had experience in opening small businesses. I didn't want to open a yoga studio because I didn't like yoga. And she said, would you be willing to take a trip with me up to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and take a yoga class with Baron? And so I went. And I literally, the class was so unlike anything I had ever experienced. I walked right up to him after class and asked him what his plans for growth were. And we had a very short conversation. And we went home, and 4 months later, Down Dog Yoga opened. So that was how it started.
I love that. So you were inspired by experience, right?
Yes, it was the actual experience that moved through me in that classroom. I had
So
never heard anyone speak to personal transformation. I was a kid of the 50s. My dad was self-employed. He had his own business, but a super hard worker. They're like, blue collar workers, my folks. They worked really hard. And I really just grew up in a household where their greatest job that they were very successful at was to put food on the table and a roof over our heads and make sure that we stayed safe. So there was no talk about personal transformation. I didn't even know what that meant.
right.
And so to go into this environment and then add to that somebody's talking through an entire class while moving you through 95 degrees through 2 hours worth of these crazy poses that I didn't know how to do. Now we know they weren't that crazy, but it felt that way. Was like, whoa, nothing like I'd ever experienced before. And so
Right.
that was really the pull for me, that whole, the sweating, the moving, but this talk of what possibility could look like in our lives just really caught my ear. And that was what has always been, more than anything in this work, is that piece, is the uplifting messaging that I heard in the room.
Absolutely. I just want to pull a couple threads on that before we talk about to like your new perspective. I had the pleasure of talking to Baron recently, and I was telling him about I had almost the exact same story that you did. I hated yoga. There were no endorphins. It seemed boring. I'd only been to one class, and I went, it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. And I think the key word that we keep talking about, guys, is experience.
Mhm.
And one way to profoundly experience is to have a mind, body, spirit connection, right? Quite often we try and compartmentalize the human being. We're just working on our body, or we're just working on our head, or we're just, sitting in church or whatever it is. But what was so beautiful about that experience for me when I first went into one of your classes was that mind body experience. It just happened to you, right? But you had to be open to receive it. So I think,
Well,
like,
yeah.
how do you teach people that aren't gonna go into a yoga studio yet? We'll get everybody there someday. How do you teach people, Patty, to be open and aware of experience so that they can connect to who they are? Like you said, you didn't know at first, but now you know you're a visionary entrepreneur.
Mhm.
How and that doesn't mean everybody needs to be a visionary entrepreneur. Not everybody
Well,
will be.
no, not everybody is, and they're
So
not
how do
meant to
you
be.
teach them? Like, what's your advice for teaching people to gain awareness and be open to experience so that when you tap into your authentic self, that's the thing to keep going with?
Yeah. Well, I just want to wind back for a second to the classroom experience, because I think it's really important to acknowledge this, that not all things are equal, right? And the way I was trained in the tradition that I was trained in was very skillful in how people were able to have a deeper experience beyond. It's not just a mind body connection, but it's how do we tap into the nervous system?
Yes.
How do we use words that tap in? How do we move people in a certain way? Right. So it has to, in anything, people have to feel touched, moved, and inspired. And words alone are not always enough to do that, right? So I would say that's the piece is like, even if I'm trying to teach somebody that, words will fall on deaf ears if it's just words. But if I can find a way to touch, move, and inspire them through my story, then there's an opening. And I would say, an opening for people to want to listen, and when the listening opens, the opportunity becomes available to, once we're listening, then we automatically start to have a better opportunity to tap into a broader sense of awareness that goes beyond me, me, me. We
Yeah.
got to get out here and lift our eyes, open our ears, and get a bigger awareness of what's happening in life around us. And most people are locked in, I mean, we live in a challenging world. There's a lot going on. And especially these days, and people are just in their own suffering, right? And suffering doesn't have to be like, uh, having cancer, but the suffering of raising a family, and or going through a divorce, or knowing that you have enough money to pay the bills, like all those things can be suffering, right? And so where does suffering live? Suffering doesn't live in the body, it lives in the mind.
Like,
And so we got to find a way to pierce that story that's going on in our heads. And the only way that that can be pierced is through a heartfelt experience.
absolutely. We have if you're interested, you're like, I'm not sure, a lot of people we talk to, they're like, I don't really have any problems. It's kind of like, a normal life. We've normalized suffering being as normal, right? There's pain, but suffering can be a choice. And most people choose suffering in their heads, like you've mentioned, and then they feel like it's normal. One of the things that we've done, it's just super fun and free. It's if you go to self-love quiz, unlocklimitlessyou.com/quiz. It's only 12 questions, takes 3 minutes, but it kind of wakes people up to listening. Like you were saying,
Mhm.
like opening them up to listening. What you might think is normal actually isn't necessarily healthy, right?
Right.
So, and when you live in that normal and healthy, back to your nervous system question, it causes inflammation. Inflammation can lead to cancer. Like there's
Oh,
all
big
sorts of
time,
disease, right? That
big
is
time.
caused by our own minds. So, what have you learned or what do
Yeah, it's
you think,
self-created
Patty?
for sure, for sure. And a lot of it is because people just assume they're powerless, that they're without choice. And it's interesting that you bring up what you did about the the inflammation and the chronic stress, because I just, and I'm not going to go into a whole thing about it. You could ask me questions, but my new Bible is a book that I took on and read after I finished my active treatment with cancer, because I had this feeling, and my whole journey was different. I think everyone's journey is different with cancer. But I knew from day one that this journey was happening to me for a greater cause, that there was something big that was going to come to me at the end of it. And yet when I got through active treatment, active treatment keeps you very busy. There's a big medical schedule and calendar and all the things you're doing, and then all of a sudden it's over. And it can be this real feeling of like feeling alone, and now what? And I thought to myself, I didn't go through all of this to go back to being where I was. I just knew there was something else, and I wasn't done looking for it like I wanted to be in an inquiry around it. And Honestly, it's, they have those conversations where somebody just says something to you and you're like, oh, like, did you read this book? And then that ends up being the gift. And I am addicted to this book called Cured. And it's a Western medical doctor, graduate of Harvard Med School, who wrote a book about how Western medicine is not addressing these spontaneous cures and remissions. And he goes through the whole thing about how chronic stress is the direct correlation to lifestyle diseases that are killing 2/3 of Americans.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
this book caught my ear, and I just could not put it down. And at the very end, he talks about you could do all the right things. You could change your diet. You could change this. You could take all the right vitamins, whatever it is you're doing. And if you don't get right with yourself, none of it's going to matter. You've got to get right with yourself. And so it's deciding, like, well, what are those things that are right for yourself, myself, right? And for me, there was like, big red flags of um, high performer stress.
Yeah.
And no one would ever imagine that, the chick who owned all these yoga studios was like suffering and living in a constant state of fight or flight. So I knew, once I remember thinking, when I was diagnosed, and I want to put this out there because I never say now like that I had cancer. Like I had the experience of cancer. Very different. So my whole approach to how I want to be, let that in or not let that in. Like I had the experience of cancer. And I knew, like, when I was first diagnosed, I thought, and I said it to every doctor, like, how the heck did I get cancer? I'm so healthy.
Yeah.
I do yoga every day. I eat right. Like I do all the things. And it took me until about a month ago after I read that book that I thought, not so healthy,
Absolutely.
you know?
So I want everybody to tune in and like listen in real close now, right? Because you said people have to be open to listening. Like if you think like, oh, I'm not into yoga, or oh, I don't have cancer, oh, cancer's not in my family, this doesn't really apply to me. Guess what? Your stress, Patty, there are so many people in the entrepreneur world, I'm new to it, right? Come from corporate America that
Mhm.
say stress and anxiety is productive. It helps me get things done. It helps me to blah, blah, blah. And as I read more about like from Joe Dispenza, and he's talking about the same things, right? Experiencing those unexplained remissions through people getting right with themselves, through understanding what's going on, through getting out of that fight or flight.
Right. Well, and stress is important, and there is healthy stress. If you think about our bones, what strengthens our bones, which is why a yoga practice is so impactful and effective, is that we in yoga we're not lifting weights, like we're using our own body weight to move through poses, and that kind of stress put on a bone is healthy stress.
Right. I guess we have to be very careful about like the word stress and what people are associating with it, right?
Correct.
There is continuous growth done in a healthy way.
Yes.
What I'm talking about is more
Fight
people
or
that like
flight.
they're not eating right, or they're not sleeping enough, or they're
Correct.
not meditating. They're not doing anything. They're not doing I always tell people it's not selfish to put self-health first, right?
No, I'm all about self-help now. It's my entire world.
As
And
an
it doesn't mean I'm
entrepreneur,
sitting around watching TV.
right. But as an entrepreneur, a lot of people don't necessarily have that inspiration. So I'm hoping our conversation today, right? Because like Patty said, she's super healthy, right? She's
Mhm.
doing all the things, even the things that you think might not mean, be the things that you need to do to avoid that scary word, cancer. But it's not enough. Like Patty, I love what you said. If you don't get right within yourself first, right? So one of the things that you've talked a lot about and I love and I embrace as well is curiosity.
Mhm.
How has cultivating curiosity helped you connect more deeply with your authentic self and with others? And what advice would you give our listeners that are looking to foster this curiosity so that they can get to know themselves and others in a more meaningful, healthy way?
Right. Yeah, and what I would say is curiosity is the key to getting authentic and real. You have to get interested in knowing who you are, and that experience can't come just from you. It has to come from feedback, how other people are experiencing. And that was, the world of yoga, and how I came up in that lineage is it was we constantly got feedback, not in how we taught a yoga class, and you know this because you trained with me, not in how you taught the yoga class, but who you were being, not what you were doing.
Right.
And it's hard to take brutal, feedback. Like feedback can feel hard, and it's not personal. Like if you know how to do it right, it's not personal. And so it's staying open to being willing to I'm going to use it in a way that, like, to be able to digest what you hear, to take in what the feedback that you get, and then just sit with it. Like, be willing to listen. Don't push it away. Not like, no, that's not true. I don't do that. Because we think it's like something wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with you. And growth comes through the curiosity of really wanting to question everything in your life. And, like, I feel like my job these days is to, give people another perspective, something new to consider.
Right.
And it's important that we have something new to consider about ourselves, or we would never grow.
Absolutely. One of the things that I love and I get curious a lot with now is it's never what's happening. It's never what the other person is saying, what's happening in your life that gives it meaning. It's what you give the meaning experience from in here, right?
Correct.
So if you're being triggered by something,
Correct.
then you need to think about, why is that bothering me?
Yes.
And it's not the thing that Patty said. Like, I remember Patty, guys, she once told me, she's like, "You like to be right, don't you?" And I even though I was right, I'm like, "Oh, shoot, she's right. I do like to be
That's
right."
so funny, even though I was right.
Right? So I had but it was I told you the other day, I would not have received that feedback. Couldn't have heard it. That was just the
Mhm.
right moment from the right person. So you also said in class the other day, we do allow some swearing on this podcast. You like, what did
Oh,
you
good,
say
I
about
love to swear.
like sometimes you need somebody to tell you you're an asshole, right?
Yes, I said that in class, didn't I? Yeah, that's right, you need somebody to say you're an asshole.
And not take it personally, right?
Yeah,
Like,
we're like,
oh,
wow, like, if
interesting.
somebody thinks you're an asshole, there's something for you to look at there.
Well, and how are they receiving me? And I might not being an asshole. Maybe it's how they're receiving, but just get
Yeah,
curious, guys. Not only about how you're being, but how are you being received?
correct.
Right?
We
And I
wanna
think
know how we're landing in someone else's experience, and then that can help 2 people, right? The person that's having the experience can wanna understand why I might or you might be triggering them, right? And then on the other side, the one who's saying the thing that someone thinks, "Oh, you're an asshole," has something to learn about, like, "Oh, maybe I could have put a bit more of a pause in that," or maybe I could, it just gives everybody an opportunity to get curious about what just went down.
absolutely. And I think that is one of the secrets. There are so many, and we only have a few more minutes, so we can't go through all of them. But to getting out of that fight or flight, because people
Mm.
are stuck there, Patty. You know that, right?
And I know that for sure.
And that's
Yes.
why there's so much trauma and there's so much stress and there's so much disharmony and disconnection. And so, what Patty and I are talking about is like, how do you connect to others? Well, first, you got to connect to yourself. And when you can do that, you can come out of fight or flight because you know it's not about like you're going to die. There's no lion chasing you. You're not going to get kicked out of the tribe, right? Like our primitive minds think, right? That this fight or flight is a solution that we have to employ or we might die. Well, that's not the world that we live in. And actually, we're creating the death. We're creating the
Correct.
cancer by
We
staying in
are
that fight or flight.
we're creating the disease. Yeah, self-created. And it's not to say there's not a physiology to it, but at the end of the day, the biggest culprit, we're the biggest culprit of what brings disease onto ourselves in our thinking.
Yeah, I think it was Chopra maybe that I saw it where he said, or maybe a Sadhguru, I can't keep track, but disease is just dis-ease.
That's it. Yeah, I post that all the time. Dis-ease, that's what it is.
So we have to find a way to get back into ease in ourselves and to
Mhm.
ease in our community and ease into connection with others. And if you're having troubles with that, again, it's so much easier just to see it like Patty said. Sometimes other people have to call you out on it. Maybe you don't have that person right now in your life to call you out on it. Just take this little quiz and it'll tell you, right? Like what's going up on in your life right now? Like are you having a hard time connecting deeply with others? Do you judge others a lot? Right? Do you judge yourself? Right? If we can get rid of fear and judgment of self and others, then we can get rid of the dis-ease and the disease in our world. And so, Patty, what would you say to those that are thinking about what's the next step? We don't, for so long, even before I started yoga and that journey, I thought, oh, I had to live a certain way to survive, to pay the bills, to get the kids through college. And then maybe 10 years from now, maybe then I would start figuring out who I am and getting curious and living my purpose, right? Because I thought, oh, I must survive. All well intentioned how my parents brought me up, right?
Right.
Live beneath your means. A job is a job. It's not supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be meaningful. It's supposed to pay the bills, but it's not true. So, what advice would you give to our listeners so that they start living their best lives right now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds trite. Of course, I could say something vague like, trust the process, and you'd be like, yeah, whatever, right? I would say it really is about developing practices in your life that will support the courage to consider there's a world view that is more uplifting than the one that we're living from. Most people are living from resignation. They feel resigned. This is just who I am. This is how it is. This is what, there's a lot of, there's no possibility. They're not living in they're living in contraction. And life opens up through expanding our point of view and our worldview, our view of ourselves, and then the bigger worldview. And that was the biggest thing for me is I've always been that person who had an eye for, for possibility. But even more now, like I have to say, like now I really truly am fearless. And all we have to do is consider that it's possible. Just consider it. And then even if you're scared to death, one foot in front of the other. And as you said, Yvonne, you're like, just watch, you're not going to die from it.
Yeah. We think our mind gets crazy on us, right? And it
I
goes into
told
that fight or flight over silly things.
I was coaching somebody today, and I shared a story because they were talking about a fear that I had, this terrible fear of driving over bridges my whole life. And my father was like a professional driver, and he used to say to me going over the bridge, he goes, just take up two lanes. Just drive right down the middle of the lane. And I'm like, I can't do that. Everybody, he's like, well, what's the worst that could happen? Somebody's going to honk at you. Like, you're never going to see them again. Like, what's the word? Like, I always love that. Like, take a look. Like, what's the worst that can happen? And you're going to start to discover that it's actually not true.
Absolutely. One of the things that we talk about in our community a lot, our company's called Limitless You, and we have a community where we're helping people see that and take steps and then realize, like, oh, that was just a lie I've been telling myself. Because quite
Yes.
often, our fears, our judgment, anything that's making you feel uncomfortable, people will go to talk therapy, they'll go to all this trouble to try and like fix that thing. But that thing our subconscious mind thinks is a solution to something it fears is worse, like
Yeah, you got
dying.
like the thinking, the bottom line is you gotta get to the feeling the feel, right? Like you gotta if there's a feeling that comes up for you and it's fear, sit with it for 5 minutes a day and let all the fears come up, like experience the experience of the feeling. Thinking about it only turns it into a big hairy monster. Give yourself every opportunity to face the fear, whatever it is for you. And it'll start
Absolutely.
to dissipate because you'll prove to yourself that it's been exactly that, because the mind will lie to you. It doesn't want you to succeed.
Yeah, I think taking action, and it doesn't even have to be, like you said, huge action. I had a fear of
Mm-mm.
open water. I went and got open water Patty certified. Maybe that's a bigger step than you're willing to take. That's fine. Just
It
start
doesn't
proving
matter.
to your mind that it's just a story,
Yeah.
right? And don't suffer anymore from it because that's what's going to cause that stress, right?
It might be that conversation you've been afraid to have with your boss, right? Just
Yeah.
do it. And then like, what's the worst that can happen? Either way, you're going to feel free, right?
Absolutely. So, Patty, can you leave our listeners with how to think about success and, like you said, what you used to think as a high performer, what high performance meant? How, because a lot of our listeners are out there, they're hustling and they're hustling hard and they're trying to make money. They want financial freedom, or maybe they have financial freedom and they think they can't stop working because then they'll lose it. And there's a lot of fear and need for external validation,
Yeah.
whether it's conscious or not, because people get tied up in this whole image of what high performance and success means, right?
Yeah.
And then when I have that, then I'll be worthy.
Right.
So, what's your advice to helping people understand they're already worthy, they're already enough?
Yeah, well, I would say, listen, I was the same way. Like I would never stop to appreciate what I had created because I was afraid if I was always looking at what I hadn't done yet with this fear of if I stopped for a second, it was going to fall apart. And I know from firsthand experience now, and you see that I don't even live near my studio. And I feel like I could throw a match to it and a rainstorm would come and put the fire out because it's just bigger than me now.
Yeah.
And so there is that trusting yourself and trusting the process, and just really knowing that the more you learn about yourself and discover who you are, the more you'll start to uncover all of that of life. The universe does not support everything going to hell in a handbasket for you. It only goes there when you're trying to hold on to and live in contraction of what's no longer meant to be yet.
I know that.
You know
It
that, right? And
control
sometimes,
control means nothing. You
yeah,
actually
that's
don't have
control.
control.
Yeah, and the letting go opens up all sorts of new things and new learning, and that's where I have found, my freedom because I'm not done. I've got lots of great things that I still wanna do, and, it always works out, but it comes back to trust your heart, trust your intuition, get into the practices that will give you access to that, meditation being a super important one. And just
Absolutely.
quiet, like, it doesn't have to be a formal meditation, just sit quietly for 5 minutes. I don't do anything formal in meditation, but you need for intuition and trust to come through from your higher source of self, you need quiet. And so just start that one day, 5 minutes of just sitting quietly and let your inner voice come through, and it'll never steer you wrong.
I think that's excellent advice. Get out of your head and into your heart and your intuition. I love that. Excellent. Well, Patty, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, I love these conversations. So anytime.
Absolutely. And for you guys that are listening, if you're suffering, you don't have to. And it doesn't take years, it doesn't even take months. It can happen in a matter of hours just with that conversation or with that stillness. So whether you work,
One insight and your whole world can change. Just one.
yeah,
That can take just like that. Have an insight and boom, it could blow your whole world wide open.
yeah, absolutely. So whether you work with Brad, myself, or reach out to Patty, you can see in the scroll down below, it's thepattyivey.com
The Patty Ivey. Yeah.
to set up some time. But guys, start having conversations. Surround yourself with people that have gone through a journey that you're interested in going on, right? Because they can ask you questions and help you find that connection to yourself. So until next time, Limitless You and How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs, we're on a mission to help 1 million people, maybe even more. But we can't do it alone. Patty's on our team too. We're all trying to help everybody, and we need your help. So if you're watching or listening to this, if you know of somebody that's suffering, just share it with them. If not, like it, share it, rate it, anything that you can do to help people connect and push out this word, right? That we are causing ourselves to suffer and we don't have to anymore, right? We can cause ourselves to be happy. So until next time, may the light in me help the light in you shine brighter. Everybody have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Bye.
Hit subscribe if you don't want to miss out on more life-changing content. And if you're struggling, you don't have to. Go to bradchandler.com/contact. There, you can join the Facebook community of like-minded entrepreneurs, and you'll see a button to schedule your freedom and happiness call. See you on the next episode.